Alrighty, well, it's time for episode 3. Now, this is a flashback episode, one of two that is in this series, and together they accompany about a quarter of the runtime. Sure. Um, the key problem I have with this is that as a flashback episode, you're looking at what happened in the past. You're not changing it, you're not manipulating it. So honestly, having the players do things doesn't work very well because of the fact that you have already established the end result of everything that happened in the past. So having the players act it out and, do their own thing and not stick to a script is not going to work. And of course, if the players are sticking to a script, then they're not really playing. They're just, LARPing, I guess is the way to put it. So, this actually gets to what I found to be one of the most compelling criticisms of this show, is that the way that they did the two episodes that are flashbacks would have worked far better if they had filmed all of that material and then sliced it to pieces and put those pieces into other episodes at moments when it would be appropriate. Because you can have someone talk about something and do a 1 or 2 minute summary of things and then show a piece of what happened and then go back to talking about what happened. You don't have to have a full 45 minutes straight of flashback. And in the context of a TTRPG, the other way works better. You just do a few things here and there where you're discussing what happened. And perhaps, as the GM, you might do that in exceptional detail. But hey. Now, as for what happens in this particular bit of backstory, this is all about Osha and May's life before the stuff happened, and also showing the stuff happen. And that's the part about this that gets a bit weird, because there's several things in here that are very the power of plot compels you. And this is episode 3. Like I mentioned, they revisit this in episode 7. However, in episode 7, while they do show it from a different point of view, they don't really explain most of the things that are left out of this. They talk in detail about why the Jedi are here in a way that doesn't make sense. And they have a Jedi doing rash and impulsive things in a reason that doesn't make sense. And in the end, there's a deadly confrontation for reasons that don't make sense. Now, writing this in a TTRPG, you're probably going to want to avoid that whole things that don't make sense repetitive trope because, quite frankly, if your players think that the entire campaign is nonsense, they don't really have as much reason to play along. They're going to do whatever makes sense to them, which if they're not on the same page as you with what this story is and where the story should, air quotes, be going, then they're probably going to be headcanoning things in ways that you don't expect. People keep forgetting about mystery boxes, is that presenting a mystery, the people that are watching the mystery unfold will often come up with their own guess as to what the nature of the mystery is. Problem is that when this is in a TTRPG, those same people that are making guesses are going to act on their guesses, not what the actual true facts are, because they don't know what the actual truth is, because you haven't told them yet. Anyway, though, this is actually an episode about introducing the mystery box. See, the previous 2 episodes, they told you that the mystery box exists. And now they're showing you what shape the mystery box is. And not showing you what's inside. They don't actually show you what's inside, which is kind of the most annoying part. Also, they do a terrible job of explaining this coven. I'm going to do that in a separate video. Like, the next video I do on this, because, like, I've been jumping back and forth between, like, vague concepts from this series and the individual episodes. Next episode is going to be about the coven, because that is one of the things in here that's a big enough plot point that it needs an individual discussion. So, this episode, the Jedi show up while May and Osha are doing child things outside under the yellow bunta tree. Which, quite frankly, is, fine. See, because as they explain, is that as long as you don't eat it, it's fine. You don't need to worry about it. And, yeah, like I mentioned in the video when I was talking about Brindok, that's literally the only thing we know about bunta trees. It kind of looks like a weeping willow colored yellow. And we know it's some part of the bunta tree can be refined to make a deadly poison. A deadly poison that has a short shelf life, and after being refined needs to be used within a few days or hours. They don't actually explain how short the shelf life is, but it's something you can't just put on a shelf and store. At any rate, so is it explained why Osha likes hanging out next to the yellow tree? It's kind of hinted that she just likes to be someplace where she's alone. Because apparently everyone else avoids being near the yellow tree because they know it's, deadly poisonous. Anyways. So, you do a few, like, slice of life moments with the various people doing things in the coven, because they're preparing for the big ceremony where May and Osha are going to be officially welcomed into the coven as full members. Now, the specific logic behind this isn't explained in the show. It's also very plot convenient that it happens to happen on the same day that Soul finds them. But whatever. The power of plot compels you. Hey, so what exactly they're doing in the Ascension ceremony is also not explained, because it's not explained what it means to be a member of the Coven. Although we do have some evidence in the 7th episode. Okay, there is a brief glimpse in this one too. It's like, the power of many is apparently a technique for using the Force as a communal tool, where you have multiple people combining their ability to do a single act. Well, also, the way this apparently works is that most of the witches in this coven, while they are technically Force users, apparently aren't very strong. Which is one of those things that's kind of... well, it highlights why Anastasia is the leader of the coven and not just one of the practitioners, because she's the most powerful. Anyway, though, one of the things in this episode is you have Anastasia and the 2 twins practicing learning how to wield the Force, or as Anastasia likes to call it, the thread. I have to say, while the whole idea of the Coven using different words to describe how the power works is interesting. They don't really do anything with it. They don't explain how this ties into the different way that they do force powers, because they do the telekinetic shove thing. And at the beginning of the episode, we see May and Osha demonstrate that they have a ability to telekinetically grab things, which is kind of a preliminary to when Osha later figures out, oh wait, if you can grab people, you can squeeze them and squish them and stuff. Yeah, that comes up in the 5th episode, and it's just like, that was blindingly obvious. Why didn't you think of that sooner? I genuinely think that that particular aspect of the training thing was really just him hinting at things she can do with the Force and testing her as an apprentice to see if she has the talent required to figure out how to use the Force offensively without being directly told exactly what to do. Because as we've established, May and Osha both have the ability to telekinetically levitate objects, including people. Again, the whole thing with the weird jello bug, that was the entire point of that scene, is showing that they have the ability to use Force to grab the bug and do stuff with the bug. And it's hinted that they could have killed the bug by squishing it with the Force in that scene, because one of them gets upset at the other for being mean to the bug, apparently. Like, if she's just holding it, I don't see why you'd be that upset, unless... Yeah, anyway. So, after the whole, like, telekinesis demonstration and the bizarre way of describing the thread, because, again, it's like, as a whole, the idea of a coven having a different way of describing the Force makes perfect sense. The fact that they kind of sort of say, oh, yes, this is what we think about it. The Jedi tell you differently, but the Jedi are wrong. That aspect of it, and why the Coven seemingly hate the Jedi, does that get explained? No. No, it does not. Which is a real bummer, because it's a major plot point that never goes anywhere. And... see, also, this establishes the fact that Osha isn't really big on the whole Ascension thing. Osha wants to join a Jedi, even though Osha's never met a Jedi. And seemingly all of what Osha knows about the Jedi is from Anastasia telling her how the Jedi are bad and wrong and why you shouldn't want to be a Jedi. Again, it's one of those things where you will often see in commentary people talking about whether May or Osha was the good twin and which was the bad twin. I would argue that Osha is actually the bad twin and May is the good twin. Because May does what her parents tell her to do. She takes the lessons they give her to heart and uses them. Osha does not. Osha does what's seemingly the opposite of what her parents want her to do, which comes out very, very strangely, and is seemingly the only reason why Osha wants to be a Jedi. Now, one thing I mentioned actually in the thing I did about Osha May is that having them as like the polar opposites of a personality, like where you have like a single bipolar person, but since you have those two bipolar parts of the personality split into two different people, they kind of sort of follow the same logic, but with a different alignment to the logic. So one of them does the order choice, the other one does the chaos choice. Why? Because that's just who they are. Although, in the case of this, they seemingly flip-flop on who is order and chaos at certain points, which makes it even weirder. Is any of it explained? No, of course not. Actually, on the whole like order chaos thing, and where one of them represents order, the other represents chaos, is actually just speculation on my part, because it causes the whole like you're the same person thing to actually make some modicum of sense and not just be random fluff. Anyway, though, there's also another interesting point here, is that Osha wants to explore the galaxy while their parents are on Brendok because they're hiding from the Republic. Not just the Jedi specifically, but the entire Republic. They came to Brendok because Brendok had been abandoned after it had become a lifeless world, and thus no one was living on it. So if they set up a base living on Brendok, they can just hang out here and not get bothered by anyone until the Jedi notice that Brendok is no longer a lifeless world and start trying to figure out why Brendok is no longer a lifeless world. So that explains why Osha is literally the only person on Brendok who wants to leave Brendok. The entire coven, all 50 plus of them, are here because they are functionally exiled to Brendok and don't want to leave because they don't want to have anything to do with the Republic. Now, the reason for this, no, that doesn't get explained, ever. It's hinted that it has something to do with them being dark side force users, and that the Jedi were persecuting them for being dark side force users, but again, that's only vaguely alluded to. It's not really said outright. So, and because it's not even like said outright at all, we don't even know if it's actually the reason. It's just kind of speculation that's the logic here. At any rate, though, like I said, Indara says that they believe the planet was uninhabited. Why exactly Indara believed the planet was uninhabited is presumably solely because the fact that at some point in the past it had been abandoned. Anyone who looks at the location where the witches were living from a spaceship would notice that the lights are on and things are happening. I mean, okay, one could argue that maybe possibly the Jedi had come to the conclusion that the incident that caused the planet to be abandoned, maybe possibly people hadn't, turned off all the lights on the base, and maybe possibly the reactor had been running at low power and hadn't failed yet. So the exterior lights were still on or something. You could make that argument. However, making that argument, you would have to question why the Jedi didn't, look and check it out. Now, there is the possibility that the Jedi, walked up to the front door and no one's here, and then walked off. But, again, they don't say anything about that. They don't tell us anything about that. In fact, in episode 7, there's a point in the episode where they act like they hadn't noticed the base was even there. Huh? You're here to this planet trying to figure out what happened to have it have life, and you're not going to look at around enough to notice that there's a mountain fortress with lights on. Yeah. Anyway, enough about that. The big part about this is the conflict, because the fact that this is here to set up the reason why May and Osha have such a drastically estranged relationship, and why the entire Coven is dead. Because you have the 4 Jedi come in, conflict breaks out. The actual logic behind most of the Coven members dying is absent. When you actually pay close attention to it, you only actually see something like a quarter of them dead. Is it possible that the majority of the Coven actually just ran away? Yes, actually. And actually, that got confirmed in creator commentary that Coral isn't dead. The reason why they didn't show Coral being dead was because she's not. So, if Coral isn't dead, then it's entirely possible several of the others aren't either. Where exactly they ran off to, who can say? Yeah, that doesn't come up in this episode at all. Another thing that doesn't come up is how May went from this to where we see her in the first episode. Ever. At all. It's vaguely alluded to that Smilo Ren, yes, I'm calling him that instead of, well, because like they in this show that they don't actually give us his real name. They give us two different things to call him and signpost both of them as not his real name. Which, if we go from the out-of-universe material that this is presumably inspired by, he would be Darth Venomous. But it's not actually officially confirmed that that's true. Anyways, moving on. The Jedi and the occultists get into a fight. It's a very short fight. Some of the cultists end up dead. We don't really know how many. Like, there's this scene where you see a room with like a dozen dead witches in it, and oh wait, that's the only time you actually see dead witches. Yeah. Anasaya we know is dead because she got stabbed with a lightsaber, and it's like, oh no, I'm dead, and that is what triggers Coral to do her thing, but Coral's thing doesn't really go anywhere, and Coral seemingly runs away. Which is very strange because of the fact that May apparently believes that Coral is dead, along with all of the rest of the witches. Which isn't true. Why didn't Coral, talk to May at any point in that time? Excellent question. And the sort of thing your players would probably ask you. Again, like, this is one of those things where part of the reason why I'm mentioning all of these unanswered questions with like, why did this happen? Why did that happen? Is your players are probably going to pester you about that too. Because like the conclusion of this flashback, you have the weird breaking bridge scene where Soul is trying to use the Force to levitate an entire bridge, realizes that he's just not strong enough in the Force to make the entire bridge levitate for more than a minute or so, and drops half of the bridge instead of just holding May and Osha. Does this make sense to me? No, it does not. It was put in the story as a dramatic, oh, you have to choose A or B moment, and not a very well thought out one. Anyways, so, alright, so, what else is left? Yes, the whole thing of the base burning. Yeah, what we find out about this one is that May is intentionally lighting on fire Osha's book. Why? Because the two of them feel like being mean to each other. That's about it. Then you have the fact that by doing so, she somehow lights the floor and walls on fire. And then you have the fire spread to the rest of the complex, and then you have what is apparently the main reactor powering the mining facility explode. Because Osha had her book get lit on fire by May. Now, one could argue that the safety precautions that should have been in place to prevent such an explosion from occurring were bypassed by the witches, who don't really understand why the safety precautions are there, blah, 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 blah. And, the place is poorly maintained. Maybe that probably had something to do with it, but still. It's pretty contrived having the base literally catch fire and explode like that. Also, it's pretty contrived that the Jedi would just leave and not bother double checking to see whether the witches are actually dead. Because that is apparently what happens. It's because, like, there is at no point in the episode any sign that they didn't just leave the witches where they fell. And that is one of those things where it gets kind of weird, is that because when they eventually come back to Brindok in the present day, they basically just look around the place and like, ah, yes, here is the smoldered remains of the place we saw previously 16 years ago. Ah, yes, here is that door that someone was messing with 16 years ago. And it's like, really? Okay, then. It's very, like, picking up almost like it's immediately afterwards. Just like, I'll get to that later. At any rate, though, so this was the incident in the past, showing it from a fundamentally flawed perspective, intentionally, because they don't want people to know the exact specifics of what happened. And that's where the episode ends. See, this is obviously meant as setup for Osha being confused and in emotional pain over things that she doesn't understand. And, you know, eventually she goes and flips out and gets all angry and stuff when she finds out the truth, because she's lived 16 years believing something that wasn't actually true. At any rate, I'm going to get to the rest of that stuff later, because I've covered everything I can think of for this one. See you guys later.